Hello, good day. Have you ever heard of this passage in Galatians 3:28 that says that there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither bond nor free, there is neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus? And there are some persons who use this passage to say that because we're all one in Christ, that no position in the church are gender-based. Let's discuss that for a minute. Paul writes to the church in Ephesus in Ephesians 1 verse 22 to show that Jesus Christ is the head of the church. And in Matthew 28 verse 18 through 20, right before Christ ascended, it is documented that Jesus Christ says that he has all authority in heaven and on earth. It also given commands to his apostles to go and make disciples, and that they should teach all things that he commands. Apostles are therefore encouraged to teach all of Christ's commandments, and so we can check the writings and the teachings of the apostle when it comes to leadership in the church. Paul, an apostle of Christ, encouraged Titus, an evangelist, that he left him in Crete to put things in order, and that he should appoint elders in every city. Paul then lists the criteria of eldership in Titus 1 verse 5 through 7. In verse 7 he then says that a bishop must be blameless and other things similar to the criteria of an elder. What we see in this passage is that bishopship and that eldership are the same thing. Some translations may even say overseer. And so what we find is that there are defined leadership roles that have set criteria in the church. In discussing the criteria, Paul says this in Titus 1 verse 6. If any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children. He then says for a bishop must be blameless, a steward of God, not self-willed, not easy to anger, not given to wine, not a striker, and not given into filthy lucre. Paul, in discussing the same role and responsibility in 1 Timothy 3 verse 1 following, gives Timothy, an evangelist, the criteria as to what it means to be an elder. He says in 1 Timothy 3 verse 1 following, for this is a true saying, if any man desires the office of bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop must be blameless, the husband of one wife. Paul then talks about other criteria, that he must rule his house well. In verse 5 he said that if any man knows not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Paul, in listing these criteria both to Titus and Timothy, makes it very clear that these positions are gender-based. He also makes it clear that these are official offices in the church that have a set criteria. So how is it then that we are saying, or the thought is, that women aren't allowed to occupy leadership positions in the church? Remember that when Christ left, he said that they should teach all the things that he commands. Paul, in discussing with Timothy earlier on in the book, says this in 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 12 following. He says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be in submission or in silence. Paul makes these bold statements and then attaches it to some unchangeable facts. He says, for Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but it was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. What Paul is highlighting here are the foundational reason why these facts remain unchanged. These facts, or these foundations, are not based on culture. Adam being first formed is not based on culture and will always be an unchangeable fact. The woman being deceived is an unchangeable fact and will remain consistent regardless of the culture. The point, however, is that if we should assume any form of leadership, there are some criteria for leadership within the kingdom, and that there are some set functions that will take place in the church. Christ, being the head of the church, will have the main talk or say in what functions exist and what roles and responsibilities exist and who should occupy these roles. Before he left for heaven, Jesus Christ ensured that his apostles got the authority to teach the things that he commands, and they gave their teaching on the leadership in the church. And these are some unchangeable facts. So let's go back to our original passage in Galatians 3. What was being discussed was the topic of salvation. In verse 26 of Galatians 3, it says that we're all children of Christ, of God, by faith in Christ Jesus. For as many of you as been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. And in verse 29, he says, if you're Christ, you're Abraham's seed and heirs to the promise. What was discussed in verse 28 has all relations to the fact that we're children in Christ and we have access to the promise of salvation.